Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at American Mythology Monsters Issue 3. This is the final installment of a three-part mini-series from American Mythology from 2021. First story is called The Bite, written by Gleann Moane, art by Demi, Mandir, letters by Natalie Jane, parts. The second story written by Konstantine, Paradias, art by Cantada, letters by Natalie Jane, and Safiya is the third story written by Michael Gordon, art by Parsons, letters by Natalie Jane. Main cover, which is what I have, is by Mike Wolfer and Periya Pillai. I like the cover, it's really good, but it really doesn't do the book any favors because this doesn't really happen in the book. It's a cool cover though. So this is a new take on the Frankenstein monster, the mummy, and the werewolf. And the first story, The Bite, is the final installment for the werewolf story. The werewolf went crazy in a bar and ended up killing a whole bunch of people, only to be captured. It looks like the future's uncertain for Mr. Whitney, as he is going to be subjected to what appears to be a future of brutality. Second story, Parts, finds the monster upgrading by absorbing another thing, and their kill switches that were implanted in the systems are not working, and the scientists have to resort to desperation, but not everything is as it seems, and although it looks like a victory, it really isn't. The third story, Safiya, is the mummy story, and Safiya is turning into a mummy of sorts with fangs for some reason, and she goes on a bit of a spree. It looks like Kareem may survive, but a lot of other people don't. And there is a bit of a cliffhanger ending here as well. I think it was a bit cheap to have cliffhanger endings. I'm not a giant fan of these anthology books where they're sectioned out. Marvel Comics Presents did it back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it kind of worked there, but it was still really annoying to only get part of a story. I'd rather they did a complete story per issue, and it would have been more exciting that way, because with only part of a story, you really get kind of lost, and you forget what happened, especially because it's only like 8 pages, so you tend to lose track of what was going on, and it's incredibly condensed this way, and I did care for it. The art is very hit and miss. The second story I thought had the weakest art. It's really light line work, but at least the people look good. The monster looked a little bit silly. The first story had pretty sketchy art. It's very heavy on pencils. The werewolf looked okay, but it looked very rushed and ill-defined, and often from a distance looks a bit messy, so I'm not a big fan of that art style. The third story had the best art, but I think the story really needed to have more room to expand on. It felt very rushed, especially in this installment. Overall, it was okay. Now, if you're gonna read these, I would recommend waiting till you get all 3 issues and then read them, but this is definitely, unfortunately, dollar bin material. It's not bad. I don't feel cheated for what I paid for this issue, and it took me a while to track this one down, but it's definitely not going to be for everyone, and horror fans are really not the target audience. This is more for normies looking for something to read around Halloween time, and I don't know if this has been collected in trade. They should probably do that and have all the stories together so that it's not sectioned out in 3 sections per issue, and just have them as complete stories. The cover's the best art, and the final story is definitely a much more in the vein of the Warren magazines and that sort of art style from like the older EC era. So I think this is probably not going to be great for diehard horror comic fans, but if you like the old EC stuff, you might get something out of it. But I would say grab it out of a dollar bin or find it in a collected work if they've done one. Beyond that, it was a decent read. I just don't think it's worth the cover price, unfortunately. I know they've done a sequel to this, and I will be looking at that shortly. Unfortunately, my take on it is this is not the worst thing I've ever read, but it's definitely a little weak for what I've seen from American Mythology. But I think that's only because they sectioned it out into 3 issues instead of having a complete story in each issue. I think it would have been much better to sit down and read these as one work, because it looks like there was a gap in between production of the stories, and these installments looked a lot weaker than the previous ones. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one.